Alright, in this segment I want to use a little bit more of our brushes on the advanced side, the animated custom brushes. And in particular there is an array to animate a brush that we've seen before. We will use this even in PD Artist 2, which doesn't have the animation menu, but it does have some animated brushes still included there, and you can also load an AVI file. So if, for instance, if you use Poser or Carrara or some other 3D program, perhaps to create a walk sequence, and you render it out against the blue background that you can key against, do some color keying, or maybe even with the alpha channel on each frame, you can then load that AVI with the right codecs, possibly containing alpha as well, but most typically just the RGB. Or you could load an image sequence and then transfer that into frame by frame into a brush sequence, an animated brush. And if you have it as an array, that's really what game developers do a lot. You have a single image, a Spritesheet, or we call it an array here, and an array of images, an array of frames. So let's see actually how to create those. And you know, this would be just once you're done and you save it, you can basically load it back into an animated brush as well here. Alright, so typically one thing you'll want to do is start with a image that's probably a square or some other multiple of something, right? You need to know what the dimensions of each frames are that you're going to work with. I'm going to take a relatively small size here as an example, 512 by 512, or perhaps a little bit bigger. Let's go 768. And what you basically notice is that maybe 768 by 512, that means I can do a couple of cells horizontally more than vertically if they're all at the same size and they are squares, like 256 square, right? 256 by 256, and I have 2 of those vertically, that means 2 rows, and I have 3 of those, that means 3 columns. Alright, so I'm gonna go and grab that, make that my default. I can use the grids over here on the right side. If that's closed, let's close the info and the layers. We don't need those right now, but when you open the grids, you can see that you can show the artist guides, which this is not the layout we want. We don't want horizontal 2, we want horizontal 3. You can either use a slider or punch that number right in there. I think that should do it. There you go. Yeah, you know, hide it and then bring it back. That will show you. So we now have 3 cells along the horizontal and 2 cells along the vertical direction. Alright, so what we'll do is, for instance, let's say we want some foliage, flowers, pictures of something, or something we just paint ourselves. In fact, let's use the incredible particle brushes, shortcut I for incredible. And what we'll do here is we'll go enable that. We'll use one of the presets, let's call it Baddie Grass, and do a quick test here. That's too big, it's gonna branch out of the cell. So let's go undo that and make it a little bit less of a lifespan, maybe 9 instead of 12. There you go. And then also perhaps a little bit fewer of those. There's a lot of stuff there showing, so maybe we want a little bit more sparse. Fewer of these means the maximum number of particles maybe down to 200-ish, and then initially just 12 or so. Kind of sparse, right? Okay, so there is some randomness. If I draw another one here, they're not all going to look exactly the same. And that's the idea, is to create images that are somewhat related but not totally identical. Also, I want the alpha channel on there. So I'm going to go with line plus alpha. Right, and so when you're drawing, it's also selecting, it's rendering into the selection mask. And then there is a couple of other ways. Let's undo that. You can do the shrinking lines or the shrinking lines plus, where you have the luxury of setting the initial size, and then also the gain sort of brightness. Okay, so we have one here, and if you use the shrinking size plus, it's got the alpha channel as well. So you see the marching ants being animated there. Alright, so in a couple of seconds here we've done a sequence of cells. Maybe we want to also add some flowers. Let's go to our menu of presets here. There's some effects, organic effects in particular, has some nice little flowery presets. Let's get some reddish flowers here. Let's get some, you know, we can kill this guy. We don't need the particle brushes. Let's get some bluish flowers here. some yellow here. Oh, that was still blue. Let's get yellow. There you go. Let's get some green flowers. And so basically each image is really going to be different from the others by virtue at least of the color of these flowers. Some lilas. There you go. So now one thing you could do is pick up, let's go kill the artist lines. So we have an array of images, right? It's a sprite sheet, and we could go and pick one up of these brushes, or we can pick the whole thing, use the selection as a brush. That would be one way if we wanted all thing in a single brush, but really the ideal thing is to say take the array and convert that to an animated brush. So let's do that right here. It says, well, how many do we have along the x-axis? Number of images along x. X is the horizontal axis, so we have 3 of those, right? So we go 3. Number of images y. Y is vertically up, down. And how many are there? There's 2. So we have a total of 2 rows. And how many images do we actually have? Because we don't always have all of these cells in use. Here we have a total of 6 images, so we'll put that in. But it could be 5 or 4, in which case we would have some left space, empty one that we don't want to have added to the brush. So let's go and OK that. And so it just took that. We can also go perhaps store this image. There it is, store the image. And while we're at it, also store a snapshot of the alpha channel. So we have the selection mask intact as well, just in case we need to reconstruct that somehow, or do something else with it. So let's see, let's go and store the brush that we just grabbed. Let's see, store and manage. And here it is. You see the alpha channel. You see the first frame is white kind of flowers. That's these. Right? But then if you click on show film strip, or if you grab the corner of your managed and stored brush, you can see all of these have been entered into the animated brush. So we now have an animbrush that contains 6 frames, and we can go paint. So for instance, if I go and clear the image, where do I clear the image? Right here. Shift K, kill that. Oh, the alpha channel needs to be cleared separately, so let's go clear alpha, Control D. Alright, so now we grab this brush and paint with it. And you see every time that it paints, it's picking the next color, the next image on the brush. So it's going to be a very different, random looking almost appearance. Right? So that's how you can work with sprite sheets. If you have one, you can load one. It might be a single image that you save as a 32-bit. Like for instance, if I take this guy, right now I don't have the alpha channel there, right? Because I had cleared that. But if I also put this guy in, replace, I'm putting this back together. I have the alpha, the selection mask in the alpha channel, and I got the colors. So what I can do at this time is simply save this as an image. And when you do that, that's where you get to save in Targa. That's the default format. We like that format. That's the fastest way. We actually save to that format, and then you can see it converted with some external tools that we include as well. You can convert it then to the other formats, but it's basically doing that on the fly. So if you choose BMP and it sees that there is some alpha, it will save it in 32-bit mode with the alpha channel. Same with PNG. The PSD, not sure if that one works properly. I'd stay away from that a little bit. Targa or TIFF works well, even if you use Photoshop, Painter, or some other programs. Great way to get it all out. Now this is the same Targa format as this one, but it's a different mechanism. This one we save and then convert it through that external format converter, whereas this one here we have our own native built-in. And then there's also the layered format. If you use layers, if you build an image with multiple layers, you can still save it as a layered format as well. That's just the dog waffle layered format. But this one here, the default, when you save it in that, it will actually ask you how deep that image is. Do you want it with the alpha channel, or do you want it just with the RGB, or even in different color depth? So you need to give it a file name, Spritesheet 1, for lack of a better word. And then here you go. Here's the dialog where it's going to ask, do you want 8-bit or grayscale conversion? I would do the conversion first before you save it, but if you're in a hurry, that's certainly an option here too. And then of course, if you want the alpha channel, the selection mask here to keep it transparent outside of the flowers and the grass and opaque on the inside, you want to make sure you save it as a 32-bit RGBA. Click that and you're done. Okay, now there's another exporter. We've seen that probably in some priors. If you look at the general file converter, I think we introduced that in PD Pro 5. Make sure you use it, and what you can do here with this one is you'll find actually the other formats can also be exported too. What it does is it basically runs a separate application, right? And while this one's up, I can go and perhaps change or clear the alpha channel. I don't have to see the alpha necessarily, the animation. Show marching ants I could turn off if I don't care for that, because that takes some CPU cycles. Right? If you're on a slow system, you might want to disable that. Use what is it, Alt Tab or Window Tab on Windows 7 to get to the other application that's still running. That's the general file converter I just launched a little bit earlier. And here you see what it does is it actually sent the image into the general file converter, and now you can do a couple of things with it. You can find some image information, dimensions, make sure it's still an even number of pixels. Like, you know, sometimes if you crop an image and you don't pay attention, it might actually be an odd number, and that might not work well with some of the codecs if you put this into an AVI or if you compile somewhere else. Other things you can do is to zoom to fit. If you have a very large image and you don't want to resize the window of the file converter, you can fit the image into it just in your view. It doesn't resample or rescale it and, you know, drop information on it. It just fits it that way. And then here you have a way to save it to a couple of other formats as well. Now this one, I don't know if it does the save into the 32-bit. So if you want the 32-bit, you want to test that with the selection mask being saved out as well. So make sure you have, but you do have a couple of other formats here, EXIF and so on, JPEG. We've seen those. All right. Okay, I hope this helps. That was just a quick look into the custom animated brushes, and in particular how to work with Spritesheets there. There's lots more to explore, and we'll probably get back to some of that as well. In PD Artist, even though we don't do animations, we can do animated brushes, and that of course is very powerful to use. Alright, thanks for watching.